The other thing about the success of Muskoka is centered on the river itself. Muskoka River, long before roads and railroads, it was an access route into the upper lands, up to the great stands of pine and hardwoods. And that's how people got to those stands, workers and whatnot. And Bracebridge is in a very fortunate position here because Bracebridge is the first stop up the river from Muskoka Lake without being impeded by rocks and encumbrances. So people came here first and then made their way from here up the river to their logging camps. There they worked, and of course when they got the trees all cut, they always worked through the winter, not the summer. They piled the logs along the side of the Muskoka River and they just shoved them in the water, and the logs all floated downstream, often aided by log slides. And that was a wonderful access. Millions of square feet of lumber came down the Muskoka rivers in the two branches, north branch and the south branch. And they were into the logging, the sawmills and Bracebridge and Gravenhurst, and even on through to Georgian Bay. But you see in this picture how the land was treated. If you look at the hill on the right side of that screen, you'll see it's bare. Most of Muskoka was that bare on top of the hills. The trees had all been cut off. And that's the way they left the land. And it has taken 100 years to grow those trees back. I know that land very well. It's at one of the falls near Bracebridge, Trethewey Falls. And that hill is now covered once again by huge pine trees and oak trees. So it took 100 years to get those trees back after these logs were all cut. Here's a good example of the difficulties they had in running those logs. This is Trethewey Falls, and you see the log jam at the bottom of the falls. Because of the current and the river system, the logs didn't always go downstream. They somewhat gathered in a corner like this one here is. Now this Trethewey Falls, I think, drops the level of Muskoka River about 20 or 25 feet, south branch. And you see the jam up those logs, that's probably at least half that. So there's 10 or 15 or 20 feet of logs all piled one on top of the other. And how do you get those out? There was no big boats you could get up the river to move them around. So people had to go on there and free them up. Sometimes dynamite use, it was very ineffective and dangerous. So what they did, they went like this, and they climbed on the logs, lumberjacks, and they steered those logs further down the river or out of the log jams. And it was dangerous, dangerous work. A newspaper in 1900 stated the names, they give the names of all those people who had died doing this very thing. Up to that point, there was 110 or 12. And it all happened the same way. They were trying on a log, just like this fellow was, and slipped off and went down the falls. And as you can tell from this picture, he wouldn't likely have a good time going down those falls. He'd be dead at the bottom. Again, this is Trethewey Falls. We just saw the log jam a while ago. A lot of the falls were served by log chutes. And this one is Muskoka Falls, or South Falls. And it was built by the provincial government to aid the logging industry. And when that was being built, the fellow that built it, and what a job it was to build it in that rushing water. You can see the stands that's probably formed from concrete at the bottom, and they built the chute on top of it. The fellow that pioneered and supervised that product was very proud of his work, and so he should have been. He was a little foolhardy because he said that when this project received its official opening, he would ride the first log down that chute, and he did. But they found him 3 days later downstream in the river. He was a good builder, he wasn't very smart. That was a very dangerous time. When the South Falls, that falls dropped the Muskoka River on the South Branch about 118 feet, so you can tell the velocity of that water running down over that. A problem in the river downstream from Bracebridge. And you see here what the obvious problem. The big lake boats are starting to crowd into Muskoka and being built rapidly. And when they hit one of those logs, it would often punch a hole right in the hull of the ship. So as a result of that, the government of Canada had to put some controls down, and finally in about 1918 or 1920, the logs were prohibited from being run down the rivers. And they had to have the river cleared out by August of each year.